I actually learned the idea of a campaign from the communists.
We celebrate a hinge point of history with the inauguration of our first African American President of the United States. We are so grateful.
I didn't realize how tunnel vision. I didn't realize that I was interpreting every single thing every single day through the lens of a white woman. I was blind. It was something I could have given intellectual assent to. Oh yes, people are different. My neighbor is different than I'm different. My husband is different than I am. But to truly live that out, I can say I didn't. I have a new way of seeing. It does in some ways feel like a Damascus Road experience where scales have fallen off my eyes. I have immersed myself in so many books, so many podcasts, talking to people like you, following people on social media that I had never heard of a year ago. They link to this and I link to that, and I'm chasing down. But I didn't realize that I had actually changed in a way that I could measure until just this weekend. I was watching a movie with my grandkids and my family, and the opening scene is here's a 17-year-old white teenager. He's running, being chased by a single police officer, and they're running through the dark streets, and he is running. The cop is yelling at him, stop, stop, stop. And he keeps running and he jumps over, it's all this big drama. And finally, I guess the kid trips and the cop corners him up against a wall and throws some handcuffs on him and says, you really didn't think that you could steal a cop car and get away with it, did you? It was everything I could, and with my little grandkids, so I couldn't go, but internally I had one of those, oh my gosh, if he had been a 17-year-old of color, there is very little chance that A, there would have been just a single cop chasing him, 2, that the outcome wouldn't have been very different, and 3, a year ago, 6 months ago, I wouldn't have even skipped a beat.
Yeah.
But I couldn't look at it the same. Suddenly I had a new awareness. This is not the reality of millions of Americans. So I not only saw it differently, but in that moment, I also was looking at it through the lens if I had been a mom or dad of color sitting there watching that movie with my family, my heart would have been in my throat because I would have put my own child in that place. And it would have been so personal in that moment that my child might not have survived that moment if that were so. I walked away going, awareness has changed. I have changed. And it gave me a lot of hope. It gave me a lot of hope for myself. Such a tiny little thing, but I got it instantly. I got it instantly. And I wouldn't have gotten it a few months ago. When I was really diving into this awareness, reading a lot, trying to listen to a lot of people of color, there were some thoughts and ideas that I was exposed to that I was not familiar with. I was actually offended at first. And then when I understood what was being said, I wasn't offended. I was enlightened. There was a knowledge that made sense to me, but I'm not sure I can explain it very well to other people. So maybe somebody who's watching might really benefit from hearing you explain this idea of white. That white is not a race. Am I saying that right? Am I putting it in the right term?
Well,
that whiteness as a race is as a racial construct is kind of a distortion of. You help. See, I can't even say it very well. Help me.
Yeah, I mean, this is why there's really work to do to understand race, racism, white supremacy, these concepts.
A land of unequaled possibility where the son of an African immigrant can rise to the highest level of our leadership. And we know today that Dr. King and a great cloud of witnesses are shouting in heaven. Give to our new president, Barack Obama, the wisdom to lead us with humility, the courage to lead us with integrity, the compassion to lead us with generosity. Bless and protect him, his family, Vice President Biden, the cabinet, and every one of our freely elected leaders.
I'm here at Davos with a lot of my friends, and we're talking about what are the biggest problems on the planet and how we're going to solve them. Extreme poverty, pandemic diseases. There's a role for the public sector, there's a role for the private sector, and there's a role for the faith sector. Each of them can do something that none of the other three can do. Government has a role to set agenda. Government has a role to set priorities and things like that and move nations. Pandemic diseases. Government has a role to set agenda. Government has a role to set priorities.
And I know Francis Collins, head of the National Institute. They're all good Christian people. I've worked with them for years on other pandemics around the world. They're not partisan politicians. They're not trying to, it's not socialism in disguise. We're trying to shut you down. And I know all these leaders. I knew the head of the CDC, Bob Redfield.
I might even go so far as to say that this face mask is more guaranteed to protect me against COVID than when I take a COVID vaccine.
I knew Debbie Birx.
She traveled out of state to a Delaware beach house with her family over Thanksgiving, despite guidelines for Americans to limit their own holiday celebrations.
And I know Francis Collins, head of the National Institute.
The recommendations are for kids under 12 that they avoid being in places where they might get infected, which means recommendations of mask wearing in schools, and that at home, parents of unvaccinated kids should be thoughtful about this, and the recommendation is to wear masks there as well.
Let me just follow up on that.
I know that's uncomfortable. I know it seems weird, but it is the best way to protect your kids.
They're all good Christian people. I've worked with them for years on other pandemics around the world. They're not partisan politicians. They're not trying to, it's not socialism in disguise. We're trying to shut you down.
A book called Dedication and Leadership. It's still in print by Notre Dame Press. It's not a very well-known book, but it's Douglas Hyde. If you want to pastor, you want to pick it up.
Oh, by all means, Pastor. You want to learn from the communists on how to create converts. I mean, you don't really need the Bible to learn how to create converts. We'll learn it from the communists.
I have many, many gay friends, have worked around the world with them in gay organizations